morning and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm Diana Skaya. As the war in Ukraine continues, the question of how far Western allies should go in supporting Kyiv is really taking center stage. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden recently authorized Ukraine to use American-made missiles to strike inside Russia, sparking debate about European allies. Now, France and the UK have supplied similar weapons, but really remain cautious about their use across the Russian border. Meanwhile, Germany and Italy are holding firm against providing those missiles. And joining me now to discuss and break down what this all means is Giedrimas Jeglinskas, Chairman-elect of the National Security and Defense Committee at the Lithuanian Parliament. Sir, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us here on TVP World this morning.
Hi, good morning, Diana. Great to be here.
So I want to begin by asking you for comment on this morning news that the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv is going to close its doors. I mean, this is what the U.S. State Department said after significant air attack threat is received by Russia, who vowed to retaliate to Ukraine's firing of long-range U.S. missiles at its territory for the first time. Now, what more do we know about this move? What might the Russian response be? What can you tell us?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to be very clear, and you need to be asking ourselves, what are we trying to do with Ukraine? How are we trying to help? Or are we really trying to help Ukraine? I think the political will that has been lacking, I think, in the past almost 3 years, actually, of really providing weapons and like restricting the use of these weapons is really it's giving them, half of what they really tying your one hand behind your back. Now, when Ukrainians are fighting the Russians, that's, you're fighting really a formidable army, much larger country. So I think what has been done with this decision is obviously it's too late, much overdue, but it is better late than never. Now, one important thing is that, are we trying to manage this conflict? Or are we trying to help Ukraine win the war? I think management is not an option here. We cannot manage this conflict to a successful resolution. We can only win. We can only help Ukraine win this war. Now, regarding this announcement of the U.S. Embassy, as you referred to, as some, that they would perhaps close some doors. I think the personnel security has always been very important for the U.S., for the U.S. diplomatic service and the U.S. government. So I would not take this as some sort of long-term indication of U.S. commitment to Ukraine or anybody else's commitment. Really, I think it's operational, tactical issue that will be resolved in due course. But I think at this point, when we're talking about support to Ukraine, this opens the doors. It shows also that the U.S. decision, President Biden's decision, really shows that U.S. leadership matters because of what we heard from both United Kingdom and France regarding their own, missile use in Ukraine. So I think it's a good news, but we have to be treading carefully here of what happens next.
Is the fact now that Ukraine fired that U.S. long-range missiles into Russian territory, of course, as the Russian government says as well, how do you see the dynamics of this war possibly shifting now?
Well, what we have seen is as a kind of response from Russia is obviously really post Donald Trump's re-election, really is a more intensifying air raids into Ukraine. Much more intense, much more wide encompassing throughout a lot of territory of the Ukraine. But I think regarding the attacks that that Ukraine has conducted, which are been again to the territory that is allowed to strike, which is Kursk Oblast, I think we've seen a very similar kind of not unexpected nuclear brinkmanship coming from the Kremlin, saying that there's a new nuclear posture, a new nuclear doctrine, which will allow all those things to take place. Now, I think this we have seen before, and I think I think this has been a really forcing us to self-deter almost the whole West of really providing weapons but not allowing their use, not providing tanks and then allowing tanks, not providing aircraft then providing finally aircraft. I think we've been through this before, but I think we are part of this now. We're helping Ukraine because it's a democracy. It's been invaded by an aggressive force that is trying to destroy the whole country and the nation. So decision has been right, but how it percolates further, I think we'll see what comes next. But I think the strikes that Ukraine has conducted they seem to be successful, and I think it really sends a message to. I hope it sends a message to the Kremlin that the West is not giving up on Ukraine.
Let's now go to the European context. Of course, your comment, why are countries like France and the UK hesitant to allow donated cruise missiles to be used inside Russia, despite earlier signals of signs of willingness?
Yes, so I think, I think the European political will in defense matters, in security matters, in military matters, in the matters of Ukraine has always been lacking, for the lack of a better word. I think we've seen a lot of statements, a lot of Zeitenwende sort of statements from the Western European leaders, but at the end of the day, to be relevant in a geopolitical realm, to be a global power in a competition of global powers, you need to have a proper military. You need to have a defense apparatus. You need to have you need to properly invest in your defense. So I think it's nothing new. I mean, it's in the defense realm, U.S. leads, and then everybody else follows. And I think in this regard, I think the permission by the Biden administration really opened doors for many others to consider these similar moves. So again, U.S. leadership matters because it's the most powerful militarily and economically country in the world. Now Europe, to get closer to there, I think we'll see the dynamic might change when the Trump administration takes its place. We're likely to see that Europeans probably will be, I don't want to say forced. I think Europeans need to invest in defense. It's not about making Donald Trump happy that we're going to be investing more. I think it's for our own benefit. Europeans, we need to invest properly to become a proper force, to be able to defend ourselves with the Americans together. But it's we're always been. I think the Western European leaders have all been followers, not leaders in defense realm.
What role do you say Germany, in its reluctance to supply Taurus missiles, is going to play in shaping European military support to Ukraine?
Yes, so that's a little bit more complicated case. We've seen really the fall of the German government. I see the elections are coming soon. So I think, as always, the international politics or your kind of international relations are being determined by the national politics, and the national politics are oftentimes affected by the local sort of dynamics. So I think what we see that a government, and say the Chancellor Scholz's government in Germany, are potentially not able to do much when you become a sitting duck. And I think that's the real. If you really think from this year, and speaking not only about Germany but many other countries that where leaders have sort of gambled on elections and try to kind of try to get ahead of the game. We see the sort of lame duck governments or lame duck leaders, such as President Macron, now really paralyzed by the French Parliament. We see now kind of Chancellor Scholz also unable to kind of enact any significant steps in government. And so it's a lot of local politics, a lot of national politics, but I think where that reluctance to provide the Taurus missiles is really to me, it's not understandable. I think in Central Eastern Europe, we have always been arguing that, the countries, if you have assets that Ukraine needs, and those assets actually can help them break through the stalemate that existed before, you should allow that to happen. But of course, the reality of the day in Germany is slightly different. But that's very much local politics at play. And again, the same as with the U.S. I see
right.
There's a pre-election rhetoric and etc. So
let me just ask you very briefly, sir, because we're almost out of time now. Lithuania has said it will provide 10 million euros to Ukraine, right, for the acquisition of long-range weapons from its own manufacturers. How is this unfolding? Just very briefly.
Well, we just had a change of government, and I think just to reiterate to really all your viewers, the new government's posture on Ukraine's on support for Ukraine remains steadfast. we'll continue to provide to support Ukraine and even increase the help as much as needed. I think the security of Ukraine and really the victory of Ukraine is needed for all of us, and we'll make sure it happens.
Thank you so much, Giedrimas Jeglinskas, Chairman-elect of the National Security and Defense Committee at the Lithuanian Parliament, for being with us here on World Talks this morning.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Don't go away. Up next, more news.